Thank you, Volodymyr. Hello. My name is Vitaliy Sych. I'm the chief editor of the magazine and the website New Time, Novoye Vremya, and I will make a short introduction and will explain why those four people gathered here in this hall. Well, because about 2 months ago, Volodymyr Fedorin, the organizer of this forum, offered to hold a common project together and to define the role model of the proper Ukrainian businessmen, to define businessmen who are worth to be like them. So we had a poll among 35 journalists. Please name 3 surnames of the people who seem to be worth to be role models. So we gathered all of the questions, we counted, so 17 people got much more votes than all the rest. Those 17 people have become the foundation and the topic of the issue of our magazine, which is issued today. Some of them are at the front page. 4 of them are invited here, and you can see in front of you. Those 4 of the people whom experts and journalists consider to be just perfect businessmen who are worth imitation. I am gladly introducing you Tomas Fiala. He is the co-founder of the Dragon Capital company. Also, Tomas is the owner of the Media Decay company, which in fact publishes Novoye Vremya, New Time edition. Yevgen Utkin is the founder of KM Core. Ihor Gumennyy, the founder of UBC Group company, and Volodymyr Lavrenchuk, the head of the board of Raiffeisen Bank. So the topic of our today's conversation is the business as the engine for the changes. The country is in the state of transformation, so we'd like to speak how and which role can the business play for the next transformations. I offer the next format. Each of us will have 10-minute speech, then I'll ask one question, and then maybe we'll have time for Q&A session if we've got some time. So please, Tomas, if you don't mind, you will be the first to speak. Yes, thanks. Hello, everyone. I would divide what the business does and what's useful for the society into 2 parts. One of these parts is our main activities to invest, to create jobs, and thus, in this way, when we create those jobs in a big amount, and we deal with that a lot, there will be more demand for the working force, and in this way, the salaries grow, and the level of life increases. There is a certain increase of salaries which motivates the business to invest more, as it was mentioned, in more innovative, more efficient way. So in this way the country moves forward. What concerns the stage where we are working now in Ukraine for the recent 20 years, in our business here, we were not trying to duplicate the bicycle or invent the wheel, because it was not needed. Ukraine is lagging behind in its development, and it just duplicates the way the Central European countries had. So mainly here we were looking what was working in the Central Europe, in Poland, Czech and Slovakia and other countries. So we tried to implement it and to duplicate it here in Ukraine in high quality. There was no need to invent Google or Facebook or something similar, or some leading technologies which would be totally new. We could just duplicate what was already going on, and still we managed to earn enough during the times of creation of Dragon Capital in 2000. Our average profits of the capital during those 17 years, in spite of 2 crises, is more than 30% a year. So it allowed us to create a very good capital base, which we continue to invest. Our main activities were, first of all, for the attraction of the foreign capital and the intermediate activities, but since the second year of our work, the money we earned during the intermediate activities, we reinvested them for certain investments. So since 2002, more than a half of our capital was invested into Ukrainian companies. And these intermediate activities managed us to attract more than $5 billion. We created many dozens of working places, and then the companies we owned or co-owned, they used to work or work now more than 10,000 people. So that's a kind of a contribution as the creation of working places, which the business lets us do. And the second thing which business can do, and I think that here it's named the corporate social responsibility, but I wouldn't name it social one. It has sense for any business, I'd say. If you have a substantial share in Ukraine, you've got lots of investments and assets, you like a businessman, it's very complicated for you to broaden your share at this market. You are already the leader or one of the leaders in your branch. So you are interested in the growth of not only your share of the pie, but the whole pie to be growing. This pie is rather small in Ukraine. The economy of Ukraine is approximately $100 billion. It's the same size of the economy of Slovakia with 5 million of population. The GDP per capita in Ukraine is substantially lower than in the countries with which we have borders. It can't go on like that perpetually. The capital and the richness can tend to flow from the country to country, so there will be some convergence sooner or later. And we always thought about that, though during the recent years since 2009, unfortunately, this gap has been increasing because of different reasons. So I'd say that in 2014, our social responsibility or our investment into the development of country, it was limited by two things. It was restricted by my activity in the EU. I've been spending 10% of my time for that, sometimes more, sometimes less. And several times the Supervisory Council at the elections, including 2012. For about a week I spent in Melitopol as a supervisor from the CE. Why it's important to be a supervisor at the elections? Because I think that, well, lots of people think that without the working democracy, there can't be a successful economy. It's our own interest. There are not so many countries, not enough countries, which are really well developed economically, where the good democratic system wouldn't work, where it wouldn't be developed enough. As for the latest 3 years, my activity at both of the company and the colleagues of mine increased substantially in those social trends. Why? Well, because when the revolution ended, we didn't want this revolution to happen again. And then we thought where we should invest into to develop both democracy and free economy. So we chose several additional trends to those I mentioned. One of the first ideas which emerged during the first weekend when Yanukovych was still somewhere in the eastern Ukraine and finding a place for himself. I called to Vitaliy, whom I knew personally for the previous 15 years. So Ukraine has not enough of independent media, independent of oligarchs, politicians, which convert and subsidize this media business and convert it into political dividends and convert it into corruption. The first idea was to buy Correspondent magazine and correspondent.net from Mr. Kurchenko. I offered this idea to Vitaliy to try it with the collective he fled with from Correspondent because of the censorship. If they were ready to get back there, I was ready to invest into that. I thought that Kurchenko wouldn't need such media holdings in Ukraine, but I was mistaken. They refused to sell Correspondent, so Vitaliy offered to invest into the new project. We were searching for new names of these projects, and finally it was the Times for Everything New, so we chose the name New Times, Novoye Vremya. So we're investing for 3 years already. Of course, this project is not profitable so far, but it's very successful. Well, we were thinking about that Ukraine, with that advertisement market, which is very narrow and narrowed down as a consequence of the economic crisis, that we will have to spend lots of years at our expense and subsidize this business. But it's not only successful by its indicators, both financial, they're not as bad as we wrote in the business plan 3 years ago, so the guys can catch up with those plans which we had in the beginning. It has the direct influence. This is an independent media which influences the competitive environment because it makes all of the other media to work more independently, not to lose the share of the market. So there is a direct influence onto the media environment. It's one big trend, but when the team of Ivaris Abramoviches came to the government, they had the great demand for the people from the business. Lots of them asked the people from the Big Four, the law firms, to give volunteers who were very ready to work for 3 months, for half a year, and to help them in different ministries. We saw some of those people, and we understood that it will lead sooner or later to the conflict of interests, and that it can't work for a long-term perspective. So I came to Ivan Miklish to have proper advice with him how to solve this problem. So he advised to create the economic think tank, which we created together with Slava Vakarchuk about 2 years ago. There are 10 people working there. And this think tank deals with the promotion of liberal economic reforms and supports any politicians, bureaucrats whose aims are connected with ours or overlapping ours. Last year, I was elected as a member of the Supervisory Council of Transparency International. You know that the corruption and the absence of rule of law is the problem number one for the development of the country, of the investors. So it was interesting for me to get to know about corruption more, how it works and how to fight it, how it was fought in some other countries. So I decided that it would be very useful to invest time in that trend. Well, maybe I will be over with that. Maybe he would ask me something. So we do support the army and so on, but we shouldn't boast with that, so everybody knows that. Microphone, будь ласка, microphone, please. Microphone. As for those non-business things, I'm spending about 20% of my time, a bit more sometimes, maybe not less than 20% of my time. But I think that it's very usefully spend time, and again, if everything we're doing because of our selfish interests, as I mentioned, it's useful not only for Ukraine or for those beneficiaries of these activities, but it also has certain benefit for our business if it helps to increase the growth of economy and to decrease the risks of revolutions or non-democratic development of the country. That's why I'm not sorry for that. At least we'll go on with these activities at this scale. I can't say for sure, but maybe during several weeks you will see some news that in some of those directions we even increased our presence additionally and invested money into that. Thank you, Tomasz. I do hope that during the next years, the advertisement market will grow, so from the category of social responsibility we get to the category of commercial ones where I got used to. So I have the question for you. I've got lots of friends and acquaintances who are businessmen, and we are meeting very often, we are having dinners together, drinking wine, and they constantly complaining that there are no changes in the country. They have some problems with law enforcement, with security service, with the prosecutor's office, and I'm answering, tell me what those people are. Let's write about them. They call me back and they say, you know, we have had a proper advice, we won't tell you anything. So people want to have changes, but they don't want to sacrifice 10% of their comfort for those changes to happen. They want to do that by someone different. So I become very irritated. What do you advise to those businessmen who've got certain problems with the security service, with the prosecutor's office? Do you think they should confront and just worry about their business, or should they do something, in fact? And what do you do in these situations if you have some situations like this? Well, first of all, we're using this tool of publicity. It's working better than courts or law enforcement bodies in Ukraine. At this stage, the rule of law is rather weak now. There's corruption both in courts and law enforcement. So that's why you need to use this publicity. You shouldn't be afraid of that. Well, of course, it's not that comfortable. You know, we had in April a visit of security service, a friendly one, right? Yes, a friendly one. Everything had a happy ending, but still, it was very unpleasant. We've got Yevgeny here, so he can tell more. They just were wrong when they mixed their address and came to his place. It turned out it was a mistake too, so they apologized and gave back everything. And even the president and the prime minister paid attention to that. But we were lucky, but there are lots of businesses which were not those lucky. They just took their computers, then there were some intermediates which sold those computers for some high price, or there were some competitors found which is, with the help of some law enforcement bodies, influenced at some commercial conflict. So I'm totally for naming those people. We can do that directly. There are certain business associations, American, European, the Union of Ukrainian Entrepreneurs, and Ihor Gumennyy is at the supervisory board of theirs. So it's really useful for the businesses to unite themselves and to let the authorities know about the problems which exist. Last Thursday we had the meeting with the president of these three associations, the Prime Minister, the President and the law enforcement representatives, where we shared the problems in this case. So we had a certain there was a certain order, or I would say instruction from the president to stop this mask show, or which should focus, this investigation should focus the authorities of the 4 law enforcement bodies which deal with the investigations among the business sphere. So if the summing up of this meeting would be implemented up till the end of the year, there will be a nice result. Of course, we lack this trust which was 3 years ago, so far we don't take those promises for 100%, so we'll wait for not only adoption of the laws, not only voting of those laws in the parliament, but also the implementation. Because at any stage you can sabotage those intentions. All the people who meet the president, they have the similar impression. They communicate with each other, and the president is surprised that something mean is happening in the country. No, it can't be, but still it's going on. It's a very well-known story with the people. And now Yevgen Utkin, please. Yevgen Utkin is the founder of the company Camcore. Thank you, Vitaliy. First of all, I'd like to thank Volodymyr that you are doing so much for our education. But honestly speaking, it reminds me a business school. You're coming to the business school to educate yourself, to know about the success of some famous entrepreneur. This is an enlightenment, and so you study case studies of the companies. But now you have a response. I'm living with those economic freedoms. I'm living here for almost 27 years. I'm doing business here. That is why I'm getting only the approval to the things I know already. This yellow line which is coming down during the latest 3 years is the acknowledgement of what I have to deal with every day. Well, if you wait for my last speech, I will tell you it was a bit different. It would be late a bit. But still, if you're interested, I will tell it in the end of the day. Yes, it is interesting, but still I'm saying thank you, because this educational work and enlightening work is necessary, it's needed, and it systematizes us a bit. I'd like Vitaliy to emphasize 2 moments, and maybe then just to devote time for the questions. I'm having 2 small slides. Well, I didn't prepare those slides, but I'd like to show you those slides, because they were prepared by the World Economic Forum, not by me. So today in the morning I listened to the speech of one of the president of the biggest country in the world. Nobody elected him, by the way. He did it on his own. And just recently Mark Zuckerberg reacted to the situation as for the Trump elections from the Russian hackers or Russian special services, and he had a special announcement. I recommend you to read it. It's close to the topic of our dialogue, how the business should move it. We have the business, which is named Facebook, so how it pushes and moves not only the whole country, but it moves the whole world. So if I may please show those 2 slides in any sequence or together. I'd just like to remind you that we are living in the 21st century, right? And when we are saying today about some Ukrainian business, I don't understand what Ukrainian business is. Because the 21st century doesn't have a separate Ukrainian or American business. There is a country named Facebook, for instance, which has more than 2 billion residents. And this country is maybe so far dominating. So we'd like for the next country, which would be named, I wouldn't say what would be the name of it, but it will be the next Facebook with the headquarters in Kyiv. So why do I believe in that? Because in the 21st century, we're having 40% of the whole economy somehow connected with the internet. 40% of the world GDP is being generated by the companies in virtual economy, and now it's named just a usual economy, casual one. 40% of everything, every minute we are living with you is having 15 million of e-transactions by email, $745 million of transactions in e-trade. About 1 million of people are joining Facebook. And during 1,400 minutes we are living every day, you can imagine how many transactions are happening. And during the 60 million of minutes of our biblical life, it's really colossal. So in this world, in the 21st century when we are living, we are trying, being in the system which has been constructed by the great helmsman of the 20th century and with the heritage of the 21st century, we say that 21% of our GDP growth, as it was very usefully named, our national product, if I understood it correctly, it's only 60% in comparison with 1989 level, at least quoting Andriy Illarionov, 64% comparing to 1989. So if we're now speaking that we need to grow for 2.5% every year, it's not even ridiculous. The latest headcount enumeration of the population was held in 2001, and somehow this enumeration is not held for many years. At least it's very dramatical for me, because we did it lots of years ago and nobody paid us for that. But we're not speaking about that. If we are speaking with the expert community, approximately 30 million of people are living in Ukraine today, approximately 30 million. 35 years ago, there used to be 52 million. So who are those 20 million of people who abandoned, who left our great, magnificent country? I know that one of the companies, which was closed 2 years ago, is reborn today in Georgia, and its capitalization is approximately $10 billion. It was founded by our guys, who closed it here. They moved to Georgia. I know that several years ago, approximately 40% of all of the mining of this cryptocurrency, which is the creation of the new currency, which we will see very soon, it's the antecessor of this currency, 40% of it was produced here in Ukraine. And I can name lots of those examples. Today is the birthday of my friend, Andriy Deshchitsa, who is ambassador to Poland, and we met very often. So 2 years ago, Poland had 2 million of Ukrainians. Last year, 1,300,000 of working visas was obtained. So speaking how business can influence, it can influence really remarkably. Zuckerberg shows that. And how can it influence our country? Well, maybe I'd like to say that it could influence differently, not only with its legs, because with each departure from our country, with each specialist who left, the country loses approximately $1 million of capitalization. One person is $1 million of capitalization. And the second moment I'd like to say about the first cause of those changes. Yes, of course, there is the objective reality. I'd like to speak about the culture. Because I've spent lots of time and efforts and money for Kiev, which is undoubtedly is in many niche trends, like new academic music, or if we speak about city culture, Kiev is the mega cool cultural capital, one of the cultural capitals of the world, not only cultural capitals of the world. So last week we had Gogol Fest held. It was the 10th and the last time. And I think that everything connected with the Gogol Fest, it's 10-year-old heroic story and the story of the person, which is rather dramatic. It's worth to have the place emerged which could have the name the center of the modern art, somewhere at the Arsenal factory or somewhere. Why is the culture so important? Because I told you that approximately 40% of the economy is named the economy based on the knowledge. It has different names, but this is what will become creative economy. But today we're having the new term creative economy. What that is, first of all, the reason of its emerging is all of the new technologies emerging, the automatization and robotization and so on. Approximately 1 billion of people will be free. They won't deal with that older new economy, which is 97.5% of the structure of economy of Ukraine. It's 97.5% is old Ukraine economy. So this creative economy is the place where our city, our great city, and our country can play one of the leading roles. And that is why not 2.5%. And I do respect the investors who are coming here and using cheap labor and intellectual labor force, what we can do with our hands. But only the quantum leap, only the concentration on new mega projects will allow, in my opinion, and that's why I'd like the business to be united, both Ukrainian and international, to do something mega projects which will define the future of our country. Thank you, Yevgeny. Thank you. It seems to me that for a long time you've supported Gogol Fest and other initiatives of Vlad Troitsky, Daha Bracha, Dakdotos, and so on. Recently I communicated with Troitsky and he said that maybe this is the last Gogol Fest this time because he doesn't have any money, any cash. So why did you support not the regulatory changes, not the conditions of the business, but culture? And why did you stop? So why doesn't Troitsky have any more money left? Well, money is not the most important. If we speak about Gogol Fest, the dream, which still is not being accomplished, for me as a Ukrainian businessman, is to make some private-state partnership in a big, not something small, not some road to build, and then to be paid money for that. But for instance, in the military industries complex where I do, or in culture, because what's the private-state partnership? Just give to the people a certain land lot in this great city. It's really important to be somewhere at the Arsenal factory or any other place in the city. And don't take the rent for that for 49 years. And nothing more is needed. And the money. I am Vlad's partner and co-founder of Gogol Fest, but the money is not the most important. It's very important, but still the space is important. Such a project, which is a multidisciplined platform, which can give growth to dozens and hundreds of some other projects. This is when we are speaking about the startups, incubators, culture, accelerators. All of that needs a certain space. So this is how can the city help. So if you look if you walk along, if you stroll along the Kiev, Podil, older part of the city, if you can see the city culture growing through the concrete, it was founded. Those changes were founded by Gogol Fest too. It's internal energy, which Europe and America lack, but we have it. This is the energy which is the foundation of this creative economy. And here you just need to make the state to serve us. That's true. Even in this issue we made an article that Apple, Diesel, low costs and Mazda, they are all having their video reels in Kiev. So the big corporations approve what you are saying now. Ihor Gumennyy, the floor to you. Your vision. He is the co-founder of the company UBC Group. I haven't got used to speak seating, so if you allow me, I will stand. I do business, so when we began to do that, when we did something in business, we gave ourselves an exact response that we will never deal with politics in this country, because our country is, on the one hand, is very perspective community. 30 with something of percent are living in the village and they want to end up somewhere from the village. But on the other hand, it tells that the social consciousness is archaic and paternalism. So I don't have any illusions that the result of the elections will get the new reforming government which will come and do something. It will never do anything. Everything will do like this. We'll have Lyashko, we'll have Tymoshenko and more populists. So, what can the business do? Me, for instance. I will never go to the politics. I will have to communicate with him, so I don't want to. I can only change where I'm reaching. The things I can influence on my own for the environment. That's why I'm focused on the business. Of course, we lack the place in Ukraine because we found the sphere of activities where Ukraine has a very small market, so we need to move all along the world. So always, when we are moving, we are speaking about Ukraine, because Ukraine has something to be proud of. Could we see the video reel? We're always during our presentations, we are telling about Ukraine. At WhatsApp is, we're always taking in the internet different details. This is our latest reel. So if we are in Panama or Costa Rica, we're showing that those people were born in Ukraine, that Ukraine is the world leader in the IT industry, in IT outsourcing. It's number 4 in the world according to the Microsoft ranking, that Ukraine is creating the biggest airplane in the world, that Ukraine is the participant of the start of sea launch, and all those big missiles which are flying are produced in Ukraine too. And of course, if the company produces the refrigeration or promo production, it can't become anything but the leader in its industry. So Ukraine is the country which produces engineers more than Germany does. It's the country which in our industry is the leader of innovations. I will tell you, at UBC Group, if to take the whole industry, we are making more innovations than any of our competitors altogether. And if we speak in short, we're having 2 more reels. I won't take your time with our products, but if we speak in short, beginning with 1993, Tomas recognized one of his first victims, right? So the factory Rogan, I found this short for sure, just to emphasize our connection. So this is the first successful investment of Tomas, right? So, if we began in 1993, can I click furthermore? Do I have the clicker? So how can I do that? Somehow it doesn't work. I can tell more. So we have chosen, it was not for purpose, but we chose this sphere of activities where Ukraine didn't have enough of space, so we needed to move to the post-Soviet space and then to Poland and then to some other companies. So this cooling technology has 18% of the world market. For the post-Soviet space, it's the total indicator. But if you come to the US, to Florida, approximately in Florida, it's on about 15% of our bars is equipped by our technology and equipment. So anywhere, when we promote anywhere, we try to promote ourselves as a Ukrainian company. So our second trend is everything which is connected with promo products, and we have the same story there. We are the biggest in the Eastern Europe. The products are rather big, so it's difficult to transport them beyond the borders. And out of our history, we didn't privatized on our own. Either we constructed from scratch or we took some of the premises from the industry at the secondary market and turned it into some new object. And of course we used what I mentioned. We used that Ukraine is a kind of an island which we got from the Soviet Union, the scientific potential. In each city we've got a polytechnical institute, which is the great good for Ukraine. The main thing is that the result of the reforms of education is not to lose an opportunity to educate engineers. Though I myself is a lawyer, I was the student of the Kharkiv Law Institute, but if we lose something in the humanitarian sphere, is not that awful in comparison with the technical one, the thing which can help us change the world. The second aspect, which is rather important besides the technological component, we are working in business to be and business to business. And our sphere, it's the business of the consumer. So to sell successfully what I told you before is just must-have. But this control as for the it's a certain dignity which allows us not only to sell our products all over the world. We've got lots of German companies, Chinese companies, whose products we exclusively distribute in England, in the US, in the South America. And in this, we have the embroidery as a dress code. It's not because it's connected with some of the events. As soon as in the end of the 90s we went to the external markets, we wanted to be noticed. So embroidery was our organic choice. So wrapping up with my story, I will use the things, because we always spoken like a transnational corporation. Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola are having the final selection, so in the end we're having the presentation and we are told, Igor, do you want to work with our company? And of course I want very much. So they're making this 5-minute presentation. What's the strategy this year? How will they develop? Where's our place and what are our opportunities? And they're saying, our company had the turnover of 67 billion. Do you want to be our supplier? Well, of course. So I'm over with our presentation. This is the amount of taxes we paid for the first 6 months in Ukraine without VAT. So I'd like to emphasize, knowing all of the complaints, our VAT, it is the first year when we got the VAT back. When I expected that our state didn't owe us anything, but still they gave back for the factory which is being built in Vinnytsia. It never happened before. When we are building the factory in Kharkiv, we founded one factory in Kharkiv, and they gave us back the money too, the VAT. So before, when we constructed something for several years, we were trying to take back the VAT, then the tax policy came back and convinced us not to take the VAT back. But now it's a positive change. Maybe the city was chosen correctly. This is a wonder. Maybe. It may be a wonder, but we are working all over Ukraine, so I can say that this is not the worst time now for the business. Thank you. Igor, can I ask you a question? You're one of those in Ukraine whose company achieved global success, while people were just crying because of the loss of the Russian market. What's the difference between some other countries and Ukrainian market? Do you face the similar circumstances of the market? Our peculiarity of our business is that our clients are transnational corporations. Almost all of them. Once we began in the Dominican Republic, and the president of the country owned the beer brewery, and it had the name of the brand President, and now it's Ambev. It's now a global, the same company which Tomas Fiala sold Rogань factory to. So, practically, I can think where we have some certain country peculiarities, maybe only in the US and Canada, maybe in Germany, but all the rest are transnational companies, and those peculiarities are more profitable in comparison with Ukraine. Those peculiarities, well, I would say in every country, so in Germany, they have a very strong national protection. The German companies always prefer to work with German companies, and this should be the difference of 15% to overcome the national barrier. And when we're speaking about the defense of the market and the openness of the market, in fact, we're having the products, the technical products. So in the US, we have the 0% of the customs, especially in comparison with the China, of the duty. So just to get to the American market, you have to overcome the serial certification process. They don't have only the tariff barriers, but the same happens in the EU and in Germany. The peculiarities are connected with these things, it seems to me. Thank you. Thanks. And Volodymyr Lavrenchuk, the head of the board of Raiffeisen Bank, who will be the speaker for today. Thank you and good morning to everyone. I would like to get up because I'm a bit frozen. I don't have the jacket on me, but still, while you were speaking, I got warm. I had the positive and the negative, so I thought that with the positive I will be out of the context, especially of the first session, because knowing all of the sympathy about Georgia, I didn't hear a single nice word about Ukraine. But it's a good thing that we've got such nice companies as yours, so this morning is a great holiday for me. I deal with the banking business. I'm the manager of the bank for 35 years, and I witnessed of lots of changes at this market in this country. So I now working in the Raiffeisen Bank Group, Raiffeisen International Group, and the a company, Raiffeisen Bank Aval, who has 2 million of customers, 220,000 companies of different sizes, both international and Ukrainians, the smaller, the bigger, different ones. I've got several stories for you. I have 10 minutes, so I'll try. Tell me, Vitaliy, if I am taking too much of time. I will begin with the business, which is not the banking one, because we're making reviews. Of course, we're making lots of reviews, and we're interested both in the professional assessments and the corporate business. For the recent 3 years in Ukraine has changed substantially, according to the quantitative and the qualitative indicators, like in the bank. For instance, the indicator of probability of default, for 2 years, from 7%, it got decreased to 2.4. Nobody was thinking that the financial state and the ability to serve the debts improved 3 times. It's just very cool. It gives us a possibility that we can take the loans or just attract the investments by quality according to the indicators. In the morning, I heard a lot about the price and the value of the indicators and measurements. We've got such measurements, approximately 40 of quantitative and 40 qualitative indicators. We're assessing branches, companies, sectors of the private and not private ownership, so they improved their financial state. If you take the agrarian business separately, they changed it from Russia to South America and Africa, so they regained their profitability, which is average not even less than 25%. It's just very cool. It's just perfect. But not all of the branches have such an indicators, and it's too early to say that about the boost of economy. GfK gave us such data that according to the polling among those of the heads of the top managers of the companies, 58% of the companies are planning to broaden their business. A year ago it was 48%, 2 years ago 38%. Those are the moods, right? Those are tendencies. Are they supported by certain actions? I do hope yes, not everywhere, but still the increase of the moods to broaden the business, we can't help noticing that. Let's come back to the reforms, because there were lots of debates, not only here, about the reforms, or there are not enough of them, or there are no more reforms at all, or they're being slowed up. I will tell you about the banking sector, because I know a bit more about that in comparison with all of the rest sectors, because I deal with that for lots of years. It's very important, the price of evaluation. After the crisis of 2007, the world crisis of 2007 and 2008 in Ukraine, the requirements for the banks have changed. They change every year. If yesterday the bank had the capital, then today you wake up and you've got the new measure, the new line scale, and you do understand from Basel Committee, and you do understand that you don't have any capital at all. Moreover, if you had one standard which used to be Ukrainian, we had assets and passives, then profits and expenses, now we know that we are moving over there and we need international standards. But we don't have capital according to the international standards. Ask the banks which used to have Ukrainian standards capital, but they wouldn't have international standards capital. They are against the reforms, of course. They are not for that. It's not because of the Prime Minister or not because of the head of the National Bank. There's just no capital. So if the new rules or regulations is being implemented, there is a sectoral opposition. I'm witnessing that because I'm in the market. I know that there are several bankers here which can maybe approve that. So we can love ourselves or not love ourselves. It's the natural behavior. If you want to buy 3, 6, 9 months of time for those regulations to implement and to have the capital. For the banking sphere, the capital is the basic thing. If you don't have the capital, you don't have the bank. I think the society doesn't discuss that, because the society needs the banks and for the capital to come back. It's not the subject of discussion, right? So then we are coming back to the speed of the implementation of reforms, and the speed depends on the ability of the management to find the capital. So we need to knock the doors of the investors, first of all our investors, which we love so much, our favorite ones. We need to add the capital, because otherwise we will be closed, approximately 1 billion or 2. The banks need lots of capital. Beginning with the 2008, the markets of capital are closed for the banks. Nobody's interested in that. The situation is just dead end. The situation which we know in Ukraine, that there are no people who suffered because of the banking centers, both from the public utilities and any other. I'm not just saying because I know that each of you has the certain evaluation of what has been going on and is going on now. But as I am in the group of 15 countries, I can say that the requirements have been implemented like this at the Balkans, in Romania, in the Central Europe, where the state of affairs was better but not perfect. Of course, our state of affairs was much weaker, first of all, and we didn't have the fair assessment. It's the second point. The fair assessment where the bank used to be. So suddenly all of us who wished to have some of the reforms, we saw this task on the table which didn't have a proper answer. Response, what to do. So since 2009, my friends, not 2014, not 2013, but since 2009, so separate banks showed the problem. Mostly it's shown by the indicator of problematics on the level of 35–40% problematicity. So some of them didn't show that. About 90% of them didn't show that because of the reasons, as it was mentioned by Leonid Kuchma, just to overweight this period, overcome, to be too flexible, to jump between the drops of the rain. So the reforms and the changes depend not only on the quality of the state officials, but of the ability of the market to park the car in the proper place. Not at the Mikhailivska station, having the everyday traffic jams, not to park them at the sidewalks. This is not the self-assessment, it's the culture of the market, the ability to close the bank and to say, no way, there's no capital, I am not given it, here are the keys, the bank can't be governed. Nobody has done that. I'm not here to criticize. I'm here to say that the requirements which we had were totally unrealistic. This is the price of the question. Yes, of course you can do that without the fund. But what does it change? That maybe we could still live in this flexible manner between the raindrops, increasing the risks. So the competition for the client, for the services, giving the higher percent rates, especially for the financing, beginning with the 2014, it was substituted by the competition for the capital. Our bank was dealing with the competition for the capital. We had to convince the shareholders not to close the bank and to get the capital from the pockets and to give it to the bank during the unpredictable situation in Ukraine. There are lots of indicators for the investors, the indicators of doing business and so on, so the competition for the capital is not that well known. We think that the capital is coming on its own, but we are discussing mostly digital. Which bank is the highly technological one? I would say that in this case, we consider that our bank and me, I consider myself to be a person who was fighting for the capital, that we had a successful events for that to attract the capital. We had to demonstrate the high efficiency, which is the first thing. That's on the edge that when you're doing everything you don't like. So you're cutting the staff, you cut the departments, you cut the expenses, no luxury at all. It's not even discussed. This is the policy of funding which should be viable, and we had to create the system not to create any more additional risks. As a result, I looked like the most conservative bank at the market, which doesn't give loans, everything in a very microscopic scale, and who loves himself. He would say that there are no people who love this process. 3 years passed. In 2016, we became the most profitable bank in Ukraine, both in the group of Raiffeisen. In 2017, we are the most profitable bank in Ukraine and in Raiffeisen Group, and the profit of our bank equals the profits of all of the banks together. We're having the capital, we have the increase of the credit portfolio because of all of the credits of the caution, which is 50% a year. This is the biggest temper of increase. So we could give credits to the private businesses according to the criteria we really like. The quality of our clients increases. We are getting growth together with them, and I think this story is rather interesting. So that's it. Thank you. Thank you, Volodymyr. It's 13 minutes to 2. So, 2 questions. Please introduce yourself and whom are you asking? The question is to all of the bosses. My name is Igor Shumilo. I'd like to say 2 remarks. First of all, in fact, no one will argue that the growth of 2 or 3% and the changes are here. We have them. But when Vox Ukraine estimates and says that the substantial reforms is 3 points, and Yatsenyuk government had only an average point of 1.2, when the current government has less than 1 point, if we take for this period. Still, we would like to gain 2, 3 and then crisis, or we want 6, 8, 10 and without crisis. So now I have a question. Do you consider and do you agree with the fact that the influence of the business associations, not of the separate businessmen, not of the separate businesses, but of business associations, is for the implementation of economic policy sufficient enough? And what would, as you consider, to be changed for this influence of a business association and banking and financial market and of the market as it is, for it to be stronger for the government? And the second one, in the same context, what do we need to change in the relationship of the business associations and the expert community for achievement of those aims? I will let Volodymyr to answer. Yes, I wanted to say about that, but I forgot about that, because lots of people were speaking about the role of government. Ukraine is a very powerful horizontal relationship country, not only because we have Maidan all the time, but if we need it, but the power of association, even during Yanukovych times, was always here. I and Tomas are in the European Business Association. We know lots of governments. So when we were preparing the FTA agreement and the influence of our association, it was rather tangible. So I think that the first thing, the question is whether it's sufficient. Of course not, especially when there are requirements, when the society has the deficit of the shares. Of course, the associations will be acting. No, but they will act undoubtedly in an efficient way, and they will pressure onto the government in a professional way. I'm very positive about that. And I think this is the dignity of our society. Maybe it's even good that sometimes the power is sometimes weak, but we in the horizontal are very strong. So we believe in ourselves, in Ukraine, and so on. Thank you. One more question? No? If there are no more questions, thank you. I'd like to thank Vitaliy again, Tomas, Yevgen, Igor, and Volodymyr.